Today is Veterans Day, and today's episode is going to be about this day of observance as well as selfless service. So first, let's clarify, because there is a lot of confusion on the 3 days each year set aside to honor those who wear the uniform of the United States military. Memorial Day is the last Monday of May each year and is dedicated to honoring and remembering those who have died while in the service of our country. Armed Forces Day is celebrated on the third Saturday in May each year and is generally accepted as a day to honor those who are currently serving in the U.S. military. Veterans Day, today, and now always held on November 11th, is the day we honor those who have served in the past and are still alive today. So today we celebrate, we thank, and we remember those people who wore the uniforms of the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Reserves, and National Guard. These men and women have kept us safe, supported our families, have been and still are an integral part of our nation. If you are a veteran listening today, I would like to personally thank you for your service. And this is not lip service from me. If you will email me your name, branch of service, and address, or the name, branch of service, and address of any veteran in your life, I will pray for them each individually and also send them each a handwritten card. My email address is ecw, as in Everyday Christian Women, .amykoehn, AMYKOEHN, @gmail.com. And that address is in the show's description. So I really look forward to hearing from you and honoring the veterans who mean the most to you. You see, veterans are a big part of my life. I am the daughter of 2 Air Force veterans, David and Catherine McKee. Both my mom and dad served, though they had finished their contracts before I came along. The way I was raised and many of the values I hold can be traced directly back to the discipline and expectations that came from being in a military family. One of my 3 brothers is a wounded warrior, someone who fought for his country in both the Air Force and then later the Army, and only retired from service because it was medically necessary. I'll talk toward the end of today's episode about some organizations I'd like you to consider supporting that in turn support those who have been wounded, whether physically, mentally, or both in the service of our nation. I have at least one cousin, my cousin Jessica, who was also in the Air Force. My boy's stepmom is a veteran who I am proud to know and honor today. Their dad is still in active service. I have many friends from the years when I was married to him that have also now ended their contracts. So if you're listening today, thank you, and I hope we can get together again to talk about all those crazy years when you or your spouses were all in uniform and we were all together. George W. Bush had to say of our veterans, quote, "Throughout the course of American history, courageous men and women have taken up arms to secure, defend, and maintain these core principles upon which our nation's freedoms depend." End quote. Also, one of the most famous quotations about our men and women who are or were in the armed services, and this one is really hard for me to say because it's so moving, but a veteran is someone who, at one point in their life, wrote a blank check made payable to the United States of America for an amount up to and including their life. That one is so hard for me to get out because it's so very real for those of us who are attached to a service member. In my case, I was and am still surrounded by them. At one time, I had 2 out of my 3 brothers, one of whom is still serving, as well as a husband and innumerable friends, deployed to a foreign country during wartime. We take that oath of service and all the weight that it can carry very seriously, even those of us who are only connected to soldiers and not serving. My oldest son is now also enlisted, and I am so proud of his service. I'll have so much more to say about him and other people I know next May for Armed Services Day. Some history and facts about Veterans Day. Veterans Day occurs on November 11th every year in the United States in honor of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918 that signaled the end of World War I. This is known as Armistice Day. Every Veterans Day and Memorial Day, Arlington National Cemetery holds an annual memorial service. The cemetery is home to the graves of over 400,000 people, most of whom served in the military. Other countries celebrate Veterans Day too, in their own ways. World War I was a multinational effort, so it makes sense that our allies also wanted to celebrate their veterans on November 11th. The name of the day and the types of commemorations differ. Canada and Australia both call November 11th Remembrance Day. Canada's observance is pretty similar to our own, except many of its citizens wear red poppy flowers to honor the war dead. In Australia, the day is more akin to our Memorial Day. Great Britain calls it Remembrance Day too, but observes it on the Sunday closest to November 11th, and they have parades, services, and 2 minutes of silence in London to honor those who lost their lives in war. So theirs also is closer to Memorial Day in our country. Today is all about people who exemplify selfless service. And of course, we as Christians can't possibly talk about selfless service without connecting it to the source and example Jesus gave us for the true definition of love and selflessness. Jesus walked both as completely God and completely human. He taught his people and left a legacy of love. Even those who walked with him, these people who he chose, who knew him best, they didn't really understand. They didn't get what was coming and what Jesus' ministry was leading to, despite the fact, I'd like to point out, that he told them. They just couldn't see it because the Jewish people had this idea of who the Messiah was going to be, of what it meant that this Savior was coming, and they were so sure he was going to be this military leader, right? That he was going to raise a rebellion and overthrow the Romans, and that is who was going to free them finally. They didn't understand that he was coming for a life of selfless service, culminating in the greatest act of love and selfless service there could be in dying for us and rising again. It's incredible because Jesus talks many times and uses the expression, "Those who have ears, let them hear." And he refers to people who, hearing, do not understand. Mostly he was talking in these instances about religious leaders who thought they had it all figured out, right? They thought that they knew how to live and, again, what the Savior was going to do, what he was going to be like. But there were times when he knew that his own followers, the 12 men closest to him, who walked with him every single day, were not going to get it. He spelled it out. John 15:13 says, and I guarantee even any non-Christian listening to this has heard this particular Bible verse. John 15:13, "Greater love has no man than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." He spelled it out, no question. He was telling his closest friends and his followers, I am going to die for you. because I love you so much. I will pay the price for sin forever so that you can live. And he promised to rise 3 days later to prove that death had no more power. No one could compel Jesus to do this. You can't force him. He could have chosen at any moment to get down off that cross and say no. In obedience to his Father's plan for salvation, Jesus became the final sacrifice. He fulfilled every requirement of the law. He said that he came not to destroy the law, but to fulfill it. And he did. In that sacrificial act of love, going to the cross for us, he fulfilled every requirement of the law and broke the power of sin forever. That is selflessness. That is love. Even in our own lives, love is what compels us to put ourself behind the good of another. Even though for most people it's not going to result in death, though for some it really does, there are places in the world where faith and love of this kind are still laying down your life for your friend. But daily, we each have the option of putting aside ourselves and putting the idol of self away and saying that our love for another person's well-being is greater than our love for ourselves. The easy example here is to reach out for motherhood. When we think of selfless love, we frequently will put motherhood at the top of that list in human terms. And not that motherhood is easy. It's not easy to be selfless ever, but it is easier to understand and to recognize the sacrifice of that role. We lose sleep. We put our own needs on hold. We set aside our plans. Free time. I'm sure for the moms listening, you'd like to know what free time is. There's always something that needs to be done for somebody else. And I want to stop right there and say that doesn't mean disappearing or losing our purpose or our identity because we are mom. A lot of women find as they go that they have lost some identity by assuming that role of mom. They feel as though they've lost the person that they were before they became mom. And that's something that requires a lot more in-depth discussion as to how to maintain who you are while also being this selfless person who takes care of other people. Selflessness doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean disappearing. It means we're willing to put aside our desires for the well-being of our children, our families, knowing that our needs will be met, that we are allowed to be important, but we just put the immediacy, the urgency on someone else. We identify needs and say, yes, I have needs. It is not to say that, oh, I don't matter. We absolutely matter. We're just willing to say, this person matters more in this moment and my needs can wait. So to return this to the realm of veterans, this is about men and women who decided to forgo safety, comfort, stability for what they determined was the greater good of other people. They served their families, often while not even being able to enjoy the very people they were serving for. My husband at the time was the perfect example of this. He deployed multiple times. He was gone to training for weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time. And I was at home taking care of our kids and living the life that he was providing for us, all while he was missing the youngest years of his children. And I know that that has affected him. And so he was making a sacrifice to give us what we needed. Veterans serve a country that is their home because they believe in it and they believe that it is worth protecting and supporting, even with their strength and their lives. Arthur Ashe said, "True heroism is remarkably sober, very undramatic. It's not the urge to surpass all others at whatever cost, but the urge to serve others at whatever cost. This is what veterans do. This is what my first husband did. Whatever our differences are and were, he served his family and he served his country. G.K. Chesterton also said, "The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him." That's what they are serving as well. If you were to ask a veteran why they served, they would always list first the people that they love, not the enemy that they hate. Which is not to say that veterans are not willing to attack the enemies of this nation and defend us from them. But the focus is their love of what is behind them, their country, their families, the people who need them. These quotes are all trying to sum up what our armed forces do every day, but John 15:13 does it better. "Greater love has no man than this, than to lay down his life for his friends." It's as clear as you can get. And whether the soldiers, whatever their official titles or ranks might be, they may not be Christians. They may not even believe in the God that saved through Jesus. They are examples of this selfless love nonetheless. I have found through my study of the Bible, through my experiences in life, God will use all people to accomplish his purposes. If you think that non-Christians do not showcase the work of the Lord, I highly encourage you to check out Daniel chapters 1-4, talking about Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He did not follow God, but Nebuchadnezzar played a key role in God's plan by taking the Israelites into exile as a consequence of their disobedience, and then using this exile to fulfill prophecy and bring about spiritual renewal for his people. God later humbled Nebuchadnezzar and led him to acknowledge God's sovereignty. Also, if you look into the book of 2 Kings, chapters 18 and 19, you'll see Sennacherib of Assyria, and he was an enemy of Israel. Sennacherib's invasion of Judah ultimately led to God's miraculous deliverance of Jerusalem. His campaign showcased God's ability to protect his people and demonstrated his power to other nations, even through the actions of a hostile king. These are just two examples. The Bible is full of them. Men who did not worship God were nonetheless the people by which God achieved his purposes. Our veterans are brave and honorable people, and even if they did not intentionally serve with the purposes of God at heart, I still believe that they were and are part of his plan. Their bravery is also an example to those of us who do want to serve the Lord in our lives. Deuteronomy 31, verses 6-8 says, "Be strong and brave. Don't be afraid of those people, because the Lord your God is with you. He will not fail or leave you." And 1 Corinthians 15:58, "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." We don't have to wear a uniform to be brave or to serve. Most of us are not going to be asked to give our lives in service to the King of Kings, though undoubtedly some will. Jesus promised that too, but our veterans made that promise very publicly, and then they lived that conviction. What do we owe these veterans who wrote that blank check? George Washington had to say of this noble, self-sacrificial service, quote, "The willingness with which our young people are likely to serve in any war, no matter how justified, shall be directly proportional to how they perceive the veterans of earlier wars were treated and appreciated by their nation," end quote. The very first president of the United States, arguably one of the most loved and tactically superior leaders of our nation in history, knew what some people have forgotten. Our nation is often not upholding its part of this bargain. Veterans made a promise to defend and serve us. We owe them a debt of gratitude, and there is no reason ever that our veterans should be leaving the service and then struggling every day for the rest of their lives to get necessary medical care, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, or to integrate into the workforce and have meaningful, successful work. They should never have to fight to have homes to live in and food on their tables. It's unacceptable. Maria Cuomo Cole said, "Homeless and at-risk veterans need more than just shelter. We must give them the tools to empower themselves and reclaim the self-worth and dignity which comes from occupying a place in the American dream." Most of us who know veterans could tell you at least one story, but probably many, of their veterans who came home and have been fighting to get the medical service that they require. I'm not going to share any of the stories that I personally know at this time because I haven't asked for permission from the veterans that I know. But from an outside perspective, it frustrates me, and I can't imagine how hard it is for these people who served their country, did their job, upheld their promise, and their nation is failing them now. It always sounds so childish to me in my own ears when I say it, but all I can think is it's not fair. It's not fair that these men and women did their job, kept their promise, and we are not keeping our promise to them. This is a contract that they signed, but a contract requires things of both parties involved. They upheld their end, and it is time that we as a nation uphold ours. To that end, I'd like to tell you about a few veterans organizations. The Disabled American Veterans, or DAV, is an organization created in 1920 by World War I veterans for disabled military veterans of the United States Armed Forces, and DAV helps them and their families through various means. It was issued a federal charter by Congress in 1932 and currently has over 1 million members. Their website is dav.org. Then there's the Fisher House Foundation, and it is an international nonprofit that works alongside the Veterans Health Administration to provide complimentary quality of life services for active duty military members, veterans, and their families. You are probably most familiar with Fisher House in relation to providing free accommodations for family members of injured soldiers when they need to stay close to hospitals. Fisher House never wants a family member or a military member wondering where they are going to stay or how they are going to afford to stay near their soldier while they recover. Their website is fisherhouse.org. Operation Homefront is a nonprofit organization founded in 2002 to serve ill or injured veterans and their families. It's headquartered in San Antonio, Texas, and in Arlington, Virginia. Their website is operationhomefront.org. Hope for the Warriors is a national nonprofit organization in the United States that provides assistance to combat wounded service members, their families, and families of those killed in action. The organization focuses on those specifically involved in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom and their families. Their website is wesalute.com. These are just 4 of many organizations that are dedicated to honoring our veterans as they ought to be. The links that I have mentioned are all in the episode description. And if you have the means, please support our veterans through one of these or other programs. You can find so many veterans programs just by a simple Google search. Make this your act of selfless service today. Find a way to support those people who have worn the uniforms of the United States of America. Whether you realize it or not, part of their service was to you, to maintain your freedom. I want to leave you today with a reminder that the Bible calls us to honor those who serve faithfully. Romans 13:7 says to give respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. Veterans Day is dedicated to honoring those who have given themselves to serve and protect others, acknowledging the respect they deserve for their dedication and commitment. Again, thank you, veterans. Thank you, veterans, for what you have done and continue to do for our nation. I respect you, I honor you, and I will do what I can to continue to value and make public the importance of honoring you for what you have done. I doubt veterans would tell you that they have served for the fame and glory. They certainly didn't do it for the money, I can promise you that. These people exemplify selfless service. Please join me in honoring them today and every single day of the year. I hope you have a great week. Next week is going to be a new and unique experience for my listeners and for myself. I have an interview with Dr. Jared Pack of York University that is about word choice, how we choose words and how important it is how we use them. If you are listening on one of the many audio platforms, it will be here. But if you would like to actually see my face for a change and see Dr. Pack talking, you can join me over on YouTube and there will be video available. So have a great week. I look forward to talking again next Monday.